Several years ago, I did a story about a liberal journalist who was trying to buy some rifles. She had gone to a store thinking it was so easy she would walk in, buy them, walk right out. Turns out that wasn't the case. You see, she went in, she tried to buy them, and they said, "Sorry, ma'am, we can't sell them to you." And she went, "What, really?" Now, I praise this journalist because she challenged some misconceptions, and then she was denied. And so she walked out and said, "I guess I was wrong about that." I bring you now to this modern story. We have a few things in the news to discuss. One, the House just passed a ridiculously unconstitutional gun bill, which raises the age of buying a rifle, a semi-automatic rifle, to 21 from 18, which is nuts. And then we have the story of this man, Neil Steinberg. Well, back in 2016, he tried to buy a weapon. He couldn't. He blamed the store, saying, "You sell to terrorists and insane people, but not to a reporter." As it turns out, the man has a history of domestic violence and drinking. So they were like, "Dude, nah, we're not giving you a gun." Turns out, I believe he had currently been charged with misdemeanor domestic battery. And so they're like, "Dude, we're not going to give you a gun." And then he's like, aw. Here's a funny thing. This guy recently published an article, which the headline is censored. I cannot read for you the full. Let's just say he wrote this article titled, "Why Restrict But Not Guns?" Well, the I am referring to is child abuse imagery. I can't show that on YouTube. They don't take kindly to that kind of reference. But the dude was not making the argument he thinks he was making. Why restrict child but not guns? Yo, what? Bro, this guy, these people, they've lost the plot. He writes, "God bless free speech." No, dude. His principal argument is basically, these photos are bad for kids and so are guns. Dude, guns are tools. They're called weapons. We also have machetes. Machetes serve a purpose. You cut down the brush when you're trying to, go bushwhacking. You got to clear the trail or whatever. And guns serve a purpose for a lot of things. Defending yourself from bad people, first and foremost. Maintaining your individual rights and sovereignty in a nation that sometimes, I'm not saying the United States specifically, but in any nation that would seek to suppress those rights. And how about hunting? How about sport? There's a lot of legitimate reasons for the tool. This guy has made one of the most insane arguments. So here's what we got to do. I want to show you this story, very similar to the one I covered several years ago. It's actually like one of my most viewed videos of the liberal journalist who is shocked that being a domestic abuser means you can't buy a gun. Now, I don't know if he was convicted or anything like that, but I can understand why a store is like, "Dude, you're in an active conflict with a woman. We're not going to give you a weapon." Let's read it. But before we do, my friends, head over to festival.minds.com. That's festival.minds.com because, big announcement, I will be speaking on the 25th, June 25th at the Beacon Theater with a whole bunch of really awesome people for the Festival of Ideas from Minds.com. This is going to be really, really cool, guys. You're going to want to check this one out. Go to festival.minds.com. June 25th, 7 p.m. until 11 p.m. Yo, check this out. Tulsi Gabbard is speaking. I'm speaking. James O'Keefe, Cornel West, Blair White, Coleman Hughes, Daryl Davis, Seth Dillon, Zuby, Majid Nawaz, Nick Gillespie, Bill Ottman, Ian Crossland, Chrissy Mayer, Ben Burgess, Stephen Bonnell, Libby Emmons, Margaret Kimberly. So you got some left, you got some right, you got some middle of the road. Here's the cool thing. Check this out. At 10 p.m., Bill Ottman will moderate a panel with me, Tulsi Gabbard, James O'Keefe, and Ben Burgess. This is going to be so amazing. I really do hope you guys can make it. We've been trying to put on a bunch of events for a long time. This is just one of the events that are coming. My understanding is that there's no COVID, anything like that. You show up. It's going to be really, really cool. It's a big theater. I think it's like it's several thousand seats. So this is going to be massive. So we really need your support to buy tickets to come to the event. 7:30 p.m. Doors are open at 7, June 25th, 2022 at the Beacon Theater, 2124 Broadway, New York. Again, go to festival.minds.com. Also, you can click the link in the description below. Pick up your tickets, man. The crew from IRL will be there hanging out as well. Considering everything that's been happening, we'll see what ends up, going on after the event. But I think we're going to have a lot of fun, and I'm really, really excited for this. The goal of the event is to create a space to engage honestly with others in open dialogue surrounding divisive ideas in hopes to bridge the current divide. It's one way we can try doing it. So check that out, festival.minds.com. Let's check out this story. Steinberg. Would-be terrorists can buy guns, but a reporter? No. All right, it's time for the truth. I bring you to WDBO, Orlando's News and Talk. This is Orlando, Florida, I guess, wrote about this. Sun-Times columnist denied gun sale due to alcohol abuse, domestic violence charges. Ah, yes. Chicago Sun-Times reporter, columnist, and editorial board member Neil Steinberg is anti-gun, having written in the past, guns are a kind of masturbatory aid of millions of Americans who imagine themselves supermen. No. Guns serve a purpose. Like I mentioned, they're a tool. This guy is a tool. No, I don't like that. I don't even know if that's stupid. I don't like normally insulting people, but these are temper tantrums. When people say stuff like this, they're trying to drive at your emotions, but it does nothing. There is nothing gained and nothing achieved by just trying to insult people who enjoy having guns and don't care. Masturbatory aid. I have guns because, we had a credible threat last night that shut down the show briefly because we just saw what happened with Brett Kavanaugh. And also because, you know what? There's sport. Why do you throw a football? There's no reason. Sport, it's fun. That's a good reason. There's also hunting. There's also wild animals. But most importantly, there is defending my individual rights, be it from enemies both foreign and domestic, or more importantly, the domestic enemies are just crackpot weirdos who threaten us. Look, I don't think the United States is on the verge of I don't think we're going to see well, maybe I shouldn't say anything about that at all. I'm going to put it this way. I don't think we're headed towards a point where a bunch of armed militiamen are like, we must protect this country from, tyranny or whatever. I think we might see lone gunman type things, like more extremist types. That's scary. That's a reality. But what I think is the reality of protecting yourself from tyranny is that the enforcers of government know you have equal footing to them. And that means they have to abide by the law and take it seriously. In countries where people are disarmed, the cops kick your door in and just beat you and drag you out. They can't do that here. We don't need, nor do we want anyone arming up and fighting with the government or anything like that. That's crazy. I watched a video of an activist punching a cop the other day. I'm like, are you nuts? We still have due process here. We got problems, that's for sure. And I don't know where it's going, but I digress. The fact that we can have the weapons in and of itself protects us from tyranny. Anyway, he goes on to say that he wanted to show how easy it was to buy the same type of gun used in Orlando. Long story short, after choosing a Smith & Wesson Model M&P 15 Sport, a beginner-level AR-15 semi-automatic weapon with a 30-round detachable magazine, the gun store ran a background check on him and refused the sale. According to the clerk, Steinberg copped an attitude saying, "You sell to terrorists, you sell to insane people, but you won't sell to a reporter?" After pressing them as to the reason, he was told it was because of his background check. His background check revealed a history of alcohol abuse and domestic violence. Yeah, good reason not to sell a gun to somebody. You see, Mr. Steinberg has somewhat of a colorful past. Sun-Times columnist and editorial board member Neil Steinberg could face jail time if he is convicted of domestic battery charges related to an incident involving his wife. It seems the story is they were fighting. The wife called 911. Probably something was escalating to the point where she felt she needed help. So he smacked the phone out of her hand, causing her minor injuries. He was charged with 1 count of domestic battery and 1 count of interfering with the reporting of domestic battery. After completing alcohol treatment, the charges were dismissed, which is the reason he was able to get a firearms card in Illinois. While Steinberg filed to have the arrest expunged, it's unclear if that has taken place, as it's still within the Cook County system and can be looked up. In 2008, he published A Drunkard, A Hard Drinking Life, his story of being an old-time hard-drinking reporter and his decent alcoholism. Confessed drunkard and alleged domestic abuser blames the gun store. Dude, this is called gun stores being responsible. They have a right to refuse service from anybody. So here's a guy who the charges were dismissed because of, his alcohol treatment program, who was drunk, apparently, and fighting with his wife. So the gun store I'm willing to bet these guys are more conservative. They probably said, dude, the only reason the charges were dismissed is because you completed an alcohol treatment program. We're not selling you a gun. Not to mention the dude is as hostile as it gets. Let me show you some absolute scumbaggery. In the original story, he's talking to this guy at the gun store. And the guy said something like, he told him, let me just read this. He writes, our transaction took nearly an hour because we chatted. Mike used to read newspapers, but doesn't anymore because of opinion writers like me. He knew whether it was legal to bring the gun to Chicago. It's not. He was friendly, candid, so I asked difficult questions. Did he ever feel guilty about the people killed by the guns he sells? No, he said. That's like asking a car dealer if he felt guilty if someone gets drunk and kills somebody in a car he sold. It seemed a fair answer. I asked him if I could quote him in the newspaper, and he said, no, I couldn't, so I'm not quoting him. Scumbaggery. When someone says you can't quote me, they're telling you you cannot publish what I said. Now, sometimes you say, I don't care. If there was a politician who said something shocking, they'd be like, you can't quote me on that. Well, I can, and it'll be your word against mine. In this instance, it is the personal opinion of a private matter between a store and the people he sells to. There's absolutely no reason to publish anything that he said and attribute it to him, but then just not directly quote him. That's called being a scumbag. Now, whatever, man. These are the lines these people choose to dance between because they think they're morally just. So there you go. I want to give a shout out to Shoe on Head because I actually saw her tweet about this story, and that's why I ended up looking up. So I saw she had posted about this guy. I love it. He has a background check revealed a history of alcohol abuse, and domestic violence. Okay. Let me talk to you about what's going on right now. We have this story. Where do I have this story? I don't know where I pulled it up. The House has passed this gun bill that's going to raise the buying age for a rifle nationwide from 18 to 21. It's not going to go anywhere in the Senate. At least that's what everyone assumes. It won't pass the filibuster anyway. So they're trying to do a whole bunch of things to pass insane gun control. I saw a meme, and it said we should have red flag laws. You know what red flag law is? It's where the state or somebody can just file claiming that you're unwell and they can take your guns from you. One day the cops show up, knock on your door and say, we're taking your guns. To me, that's insane and a violation of due process because you have a right to challenge the theft of property. They could come to you and say, you are being served the warrant. We will be monitoring you. We will be, keeping an eye on what's going on, and you have to come to court. We are challenging your mental status. You see, I still think that's crazy because they could find someone to just claim it and then jam you up. And how are you supposed to fight this? But right now, the way it works is they knock on your door and say, give us your guns. There was a guy, I think it was in Baltimore. They knocked on his I think what happened was like his sister, they were arguing. And so she falsely, I believe it was false. She basically, look, the way I see it is she's fighting and she's like, oh yeah. So she calls the police like, he was being mean and we are fighting. I think he's going to lose it and he's got a gun. So the cops show up. He answers the door armed, as is his right. And the police try taking his weapon from him and then he gets killed. He gets shot and killed. You see, what was the point of that? Red flag laws will be used to justify, let's just call it racist policy. This is what you tell your liberal friends. Because this is one that really pisses me off. Maj Touré of Black Guns Matter points out all gun control is racist. Gun control gets started because it's like Reagan in California, I think it was. He's worried about the Black Panthers. And a lot of well-to-do liberals are like, but they're walking around with guns. And they're allowed to. And I encourage them to do so. I believe that every single Black Panther, nay, I believe that every single Black person should be strapped. And if they want to carry concealed, it is their constitutional right to do it. Because I'm not racist, not like these liberals. I'm not worried that a racial group being armed is a threat to me at all. Now, I'm potentially worried about criminals. But let me tell you how things go. Stop and frisk. You know what stop and frisk was? In New York, stop and frisk was, we're going to get weapons and guns and contraband off the street. What ends up happening? New York police officer Adrian Schoolcraft made extensive recordings in 2008-9, documenting orders from NYPD to search and arrest Black people in the Bed-Stuy neighborhood. Schoolcraft, who brought accusations of misconduct to NYPD investigators, was transferred to a desk job and then involuntarily committed to a psychiatric hospital. In response to the allegations, the program unfairly targets African Americans and Hispanic American individuals. Then Mayor Michael Bloomberg stated, that's because African Americans and Hispanics represent, according to Michael Bloomberg, 90% of both perpetrators and victims of violent crime in the city. Yep, that's what he tried claiming. Well, we're going to the neighborhoods where it's happening. So you end up with innocent young black men being pushed up against the wall and frisked. And this is their daily life. Now, I understand the argument that they're going into the neighborhoods looking for crime. But the orders, as the story went, was to target black and Hispanic youth. Meaning, if you were a white person in these neighborhoods, it was less likely to affect you. Now, truth be told, there are many white people who are subject to this. I don't want to say victimized necessarily, because the police have a right to stop you, detain you, and frisk you basically anywhere. They're not allowed to put their hands in your pocket. They're allowed to just feel outside of your pockets. And if they feel something that gives them probable cause, then they can go further. But I think it's all BS, because all it does is extend the right of the cops to just search you for no reason. Yeah, look, if you're walking around in the city and the cops think you're suspicious, well, they have a right to follow you. You're in public. And they can say, we're keeping an eye on you, buddy. And you can cry about it. But too bad. You're walking around, they can follow you, go back home, you mind your own business. They don't touch you, they don't search you. You got a Fourth Amendment right. I do not like this. But I'm telling you what'll happen now. When they enact red flag laws, it is going to predominantly affect black communities in places like New York in the exact same way Stop and Frisk did. Now, yes, it's a fact. These areas have higher crime. That doesn't justify racially profiling and giving orders saying specifically target these people. My attitude on reparations is that we should be helping impoverished communities, not racial communities. I believe the same thing for this. We should be having the police, enforce the laws where the crime needs to be enforced. Or where the law needs to be enforced, where the crime needs to be stopped. I don't like red flag laws at all. Red flag laws will result in many more stories of black families having their doors kicked in. The cops are going to break in and say, we got a report. This guy was involuntarily committed. They will do it. Gun control is racist. I genuinely mean that. They always make this dumb meme where they're like, once black people Joy Behar just said it on The View. She's like, when black people start getting guns, the laws are going to change. No, they aren't. The problem right now is the gun control people were the racist ones. But I guess, you know what? I'm sorry. Maybe Joy Behar is right, because racists like her and the Democrats right now are the ones banning this stuff. It was Democratic politicians in New York. I mean, Bloomberg, mind you, I think he was Republican, then independent. Then he ran as a Democrat, so you know where he lines up. But it's a major Democrat city. Republicans started the gun control. Ronald Reagan, California. But it was California and angry, well-to-do liberals who wanted it. At least I believe it was. I could be wrong about that. So there you go. These liberals don't understand how gun laws work. They're whiny and they're having temper tantrums. I want to give a shout out to that journalist. I forgot her name. The story I covered a few years ago about the liberal journalist who was shocked to find she couldn't buy a gun. She was cool about it. She said, I guess I was wrong. And I'm like, that's cool. Thank you for doing the work. Because if more journalists like her actually reported fairly on what happened, perhaps liberals would truly understand their policies make no sense. Here's the way I described it. Imagine someone said, we have a problem of people falling down the stairs. What should we do? I know, says the liberal, let's make all of the stairs into slides. Because when you go down a slide, you don't get hurt. You just go, wee. And then you think about that and you're like, okay, first of all, people will still tumble down those. Second of all, how do you get up the stairs if there's no stairs? That makes no sense. This policy is ridiculous. And they say, you support the stair lobby. And it's like, dude, when they come out and they're like, we should ban assault weapons. I'm like, define assault weapon. Like, I don't know. They post images where it's like a pistol stock versus a rifle stock. And I'm like, the AR-15 with 450 Bushmaster and a pistol stock is still a hunting rifle, but it can be used for whatever. And that M1A, I like to use the SCAR 20S and the M1A. The SCAR 20S with a pistol grip, semi-auto. Oh, that's fine. It's a hunting rifle. And the M1A with the rifle stock is a weapon of war. What? They claim the Bushmaster or the SCAR 20S pistol grip, those aren't for hunting. They claim the M1A is, but the M1A is literally the weapon of war. That's my point. Their policies make no sense. When they go into gun stores and they try to buy weapons and they don't realize that, bro, when people, these crazy people buy weapons, it's because nothing comes back on the background check. We want universal background checks. And then someone shows up and you're like, background check's clean. Then what? It's nonsense. I'll tell you what they want to do. They want universal background checks. The next step is to remove the 72-hour release period for background checks. And then they have effectively banned guns, period. Here's how it'll work. Right now, if you want to buy a gun, you got to do a background check. Now, there are some private transfers that are you're able to do in some states where it's like between a family member, but you can't publicly solicit the sale. Meaning, if you have a friend or a family member, you can privately transfer the weapon. They want background checks on that stuff. So that means if you live in the middle of nowhere, you'd have to drive however far to go to an FFL to file the paperwork with the federal government. Once they have that, there's then a background check release where if the federal government does not complete a background check within 72 hours, the gun is released to you because they can't deny you the right to keep and bear arms. Joe Biden said he wants to get rid of that. Here's what will happen. You'll want to transfer a weapon to your friend or neighbor. You'll say, I guess we got to drive to the city. You will. You'll then say, we're going to, transfer the weapon to him, so I'll leave it here. He'll fill out the paperwork. 3 days goes by. He says, sorry, your background check is still in process. A month goes by. It's still in process. A year goes by. Sorry, buddy, your background check must have fallen, but I guess we'll try and refile or something. The feds will just say, we're not going to complete the background check, and then you can't buy the weapon. That would be illegal. FFLs will follow the law, and that's what will end up happening. It will effectively ban guns. So no to all of this. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at youtube.com/Timcast. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.